when my daughter, Serafina, told me I wasn't invited for Christmas this year. It hit me like a gut punch. She said over the phone, her tone flat and careful, like someone breaking bad news to a stranger. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. I pressed the phone closer, waiting for her to chuckle and say, "Relax, Dad, I'm kidding." But that laugh never came. I flashed back to when she was little, winters in Cincinnati, bundled in her puffy coat, riding high on my shoulders while we walked past glowing houses. She'd lean down and whisper, "Daddy, promise you'll never leave me." I gave her my word, and I kept it. I worked through busted backs, freezing mornings, and endless overtime just to keep that promise alive. I thought of everything I'd sacrificed, selling my '68 Mustang to help with her wedding, taking a night shift at the lumber yard to cover her down payment, and signing loan papers with hands that shook from exhaustion. Every step of her success had my sweat behind it. And now, with one cold sentence, I was tossed aside like a worn-out boot. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I just said, "All right, sweetheart," and hung up. My hand, rough and scarred from years of work, rested heavy on the old oak table I'd built myself. The clock on the wall ticked on like nothing had changed, but inside, I was a storm. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had no place in my own family. That night, I sat in my recliner with a half-empty bottle of Wild Turkey bourbon. The Christmas lights on my porch blinked through the window, mocking me with their cheer. I took slow sips, each burn in my throat dulling the ache, but not killing it. I tried to reason it out. Maybe she and Caleb wanted space. Maybe it was some in-law tradition I didn't fit into. But deep down, I knew the truth. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was ashamed of me. I wasn't polished like Caleb's parents, the high-powered Chicago lawyers. I was just a man with grease-stained hands, a guy who built instead of bragged. The more I thought about it, the more it stung. Every inch of their fancy house screamed my sacrifice. Granite countertops, hardwood floors, furniture that cost more than my truck. All of it paid for, because I kept grinding. And now, I wasn't even good enough to sit at their Christmas table. I leaned forward, staring at the mortgage statements stacked in my desk. They weren't Caleb's. They weren't Serafina's. They were mine. My name was on every page. And right then, a thought clawed its way into my mind. What if I just stopped paying? The idea sat there, heavy and dangerous. At first, it felt wrong, like betraying her. But then I remembered she'd already betrayed me. I'd given her everything, and she'd repaid me with rejection. Why should I keep bleeding for someone who wanted me erased from her life? The more I turned it over my head, the lighter I felt. For years, I'd carried her like a pack on my back. Maybe it was time she felt her own weight. Maybe it was time she learned what life was without Dad picking up the pieces. I grabbed my phone and called the bank. The woman on the line was polite, chipper, too cheerful for the conversation we were about to have. She confirmed the mortgage was under my name. Hearing that nearly made me laugh. Caleb strutted around in that house like a king, but the crown wasn't his. It was mine, and I could take it off whenever I wanted. I told her to stop the automatic payments. Her voice faltered, asking if I was sure. My jaw tightened. "Yes," I said. My pulse hammered as I ended the call, waiting for regret to creep in. But it never did. All I felt was power, raw, unfamiliar, and intoxicating. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, weak and pale. My head pounded from bourbon, but my resolve was stone-cold clear. I poured myself black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just the way I'd always liked it. Bitter, honest, like life. I imagined Serafina opening the first notice from the bank, her perfect little bubble bursting. Caleb pacing in his designer loafers, running his hands through that slick hair of his, realizing daddy-in-law wasn't their safety net anymore. And me? I'd be sitting right here, sipping coffee, finally done being their silent workhorse. But even in the satisfaction, grief twisted in my chest. I didn't want revenge. Hell, I wanted my daughter back. I wanted the little girl who used to bake gingerbread cookies with me, who made me promise to never leave. But she had left me first. Maybe pain was the only way she'd listen now. I pulled an old photo album from the shelf. Serafina at 5, grinning wide with frosting on her cheeks. Serafina at 12, dragging me through the mall to buy gifts I couldn't afford. Serafina at 21, cap in the air while I clapped until my palms stung. My eyes blurred as memories bled together. How had we gone from that to this? 2 days passed before I got the first call from Serafina. I let it ring, my thumb hover over the screen, but I didn't answer. For once, I wanted her to feel what silence felt like on the other end. By the 5th call, she left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, trembling, trying to sound calm. "Dad, something's wrong with the mortgage. Can you call me back?" I listened to it 3 times. The first time, my chest clenched. The second, my jaw tightened. By the 3rd, I realized something. She still needed me. No matter how high she climbed, no matter how far she tried to push me out, I was the backbone holding it all up. Without me, it all crumbled. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the winter air biting at my face. I lit a cigar I'd been saving since Caleb's wedding. A gift I never touched because I thought I'd share it with him one day. I puffed once, letting the smoke curl into the dark. It tasted like bitter satisfaction. Part of me wanted to call her back to say, "Now you understand." But another part of me, the part that had been trampled and dismissed, stayed quiet. I owed myself that silence. For once, I wasn't the one begging for a seat at the table. By the end of the week, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was, Serafina, my little girl, bundled in a cashmere coat, snowflakes melting in her hair. But her eyes looked different. Harder, nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was facing her father or her enemy. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked, her breath clouding in the cold air. For a second, I almost stepped aside. Almost. But then I remembered her words. "You're not welcome this Christmas." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, letting her feel the weight of that silence. "Talk," I said finally, my voice rough. She shifted, biting her lip like she used to when she was a kid caught sneaking cookies. "The bank says payment stopped." Caleb's panicking. We don't know what's going on." I studied her. This woman who was once the little girl who called me her hero. "You don't know what's going on?" I asked, my tone sharp enough to cut. Funny, that's how I felt when my own daughter told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. How had we gone from that to this? 2 days passed before I got the first call from Serafina. I let it ring. My thumb hovered over the screen, but I didn't answer. For once, I wanted her to feel what silence felt like on the other end. By the 5th call, she left a voicemail. Her voice was tight, trembling, trying to sound calm. "Dad, something's wrong with the mortgage. Can you call me back?" I listened to it 3 times. The first time, my chest clenched. The second, my jaw tightened. By the 3rd, I realized something. She still needed me. No matter how high she climbed, no matter how far she tried to push me out, I was the backbone holding it all up. Without me, it all crumbled. That night, I sat outside on the porch, the winter air biting at my face. I lit a cigar I'd been saving since Caleb's wedding. A gift I never touched because I thought I'd share it with him one day. I puffed once, letting the smoke curl into the dark. It tasted like bitter satisfaction. Part of me wanted to call her back to say, "Now you understand." But another part of me, the part that had been trampled and dismissed, stayed quiet. I owed myself that silence. For once, I wasn't the one begging for a seat at the table. By the end of the week, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, there she was, Serafina, my little girl, bundled in a cashmere coat, snowflakes melting in her hair. But her eyes looked different. Harder, nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was facing her father or her enemy. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked, her breath clouding in the cold air. For a second, I almost stepped aside. Almost. But then I remembered her words. "You're not welcome this Christmas." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, letting her feel the weight of that silence. "Talk," I said finally, my voice rough. She shifted, biting her lip like she used to when she was a kid caught sneaking cookies. "The bank says payment stopped." Caleb's panicking. We don't know what's going on." I studied her. This woman who was once the little girl who called me her hero. You don't know what's going on? I asked, my tone sharp enough to cut. Funny, that's how I felt when my own daughter told me I wasn't welcome at Christmas. Her face flushed with shame, her mouth opening but no words coming out. For the first time in years, I saw her small again, not the polished woman with her perfect house, but my daughter, trembling like a kid who disappointed her dad. And I let the silence stretch until it hurt. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my chair, staring at the shadows on the wall, replaying her face at my doorstep. She was scared. Scared not just of losing her house, but of losing me. And that thought twisted my gut. I poured another glass of bourbon, but it didn't go down easy this time. My throat tightened, my chest heavy. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to remember, to see me again, not as the man she pushed aside, but as the father who gave everything. I thought of Caleb, too. The slick smiles, the handshakes that felt like deals instead of greetings. He had pulled her into his world, where money and appearances mattered more than loyalty. I wondered how much of this rejection had been his idea. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about Serafina. It was about Caleb. And maybe teaching him a lesson was the only way to reach her. I downed the drink and whispered into the empty room, "You picked the wrong man to underestimate, Caleb." The following week, I got a letter from the bank confirming the account was delinquent. I held it in my hands, running my thumb over the seal, imagining the panic in their house when it arrived. A strange calm washed over me. This wasn't just payback. It was justice. I drove by their neighborhood that evening, snow crunching under my tires. Through the wide living room window, I saw their giant Christmas tree glittering like something out of a magazine spread. But I also saw Caleb pacing, phone pressed his ear, frustration etched into every movement. Serafina sat on the couch, her head in her hands. I parked down the block and just watched. My breath fogged the windshield, my heart steady. I didn't feel cruel. I felt awake. For years, I had been their silent safety net. Now, I was a storm they never saw coming. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The days after Serafina's visit were electric. Every knock on the door, every ring of the phone made my stomach tighten. I found myself pacing the living room, old boots scraping the hardwood, the bourbon bottle sitting untouched on the counter. I wasn't nervous. I was ready for the storm I had quietly built. At night, I lit the fireplace and watched the flames twist like fingers clawing at the darkness. I thought about my younger self, hauling lumber in freezing rain, never missing a Christmas for my little girl. And now here I was orchestrating a reckoning from shadows. Then came Caleb's text. He didn't know I'd seen him pacing through the window. He called me once, but I ignored it. I wanted him to feel powerless first, to realize that appearances could be deceptive. I let the messages sit, the tiny vibrations in my pocket a reminder of my quiet control. I started planning subtle moves, checking their accounts, sending hints through mutual acquaintances, seeing how fast panic would spread when the first domino fell. Each step was calculated, and yet part of me feared that the line between justice and cruelty might blur. I clenched my fists. It didn't matter. He had forced my hand. Serafina came over again, but this time she didn't knock. She just appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed, hair messy from the cold. "Dad, what are you doing?" she asked, voice quivering. I leaned back in my chair, hands steepled. "I'm showing you what it feels like when the one who built your world isn't welcome anymore." My voice was steady, the kind of calm that made people uneasy. Her eyes darted around the room. I didn't mean it like that," she stammered. "It wasn't just me. Caleb's family." I cut her off with a sharp look. "It doesn't matter who planted the seed. You let it grow. You told me I wasn't welcome. Do you remember?" Her shoulders sagged. "Yes, I remember. I thought." "You thought what?" I asked, my tone edge was steel. "That I'd just roll over? That I'd let you erase me?" She shook her head slowly. Her lip trembled. "No, Dad, I held up a hand. "Let me finish this my way." I spent the next few days watching, learning, waiting. Caleb grew frantic. pacing like a caged animal, while Serafina oscillated between anger and guilt. Their perfect Christmas was cracking, and it was all unfolding before my eyes. But as much as I relished their panic, a gnawing emptiness tugged at me. This wasn't the victory I had imagined. I didn't want to humiliate them. I wanted my daughter back. I wanted us to laugh again, like we had over gingerbread cookies and crooked Christmas lights. I took long walks at night, boots crunching through the snow, replaying memories of her childhood. I remembered the scraped knees, the snowball fights, the way she'd curl up on my chest when storms rolled in. I realized I could win this battle and still lose the war for her heart. That thought made me pause. Revenge was satisfying, but love, real, messy, stubborn love, was stronger. One evening, I decided to confront Caleb directly. I showed up at their house, snow covering my coat, hands in pockets. Caleb opened the door, expression twisted with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" I looked at him calmly, like a man who had nothing left to lose. "I'm here to remind you that the world isn't built on appearances, Caleb. It's built on sweat, work, and loyalty. Something you'll never understand." He laughed nervously, the kind of fake laugh people use to mask fear. "This isn't funny," he said, stepping aside to let me in. I didn't enter. I just stood in the doorway, a shadow against the warm light of their living room. "Funny," I said, my voice low and steady. "No, Caleb, it's reality. And reality is catching up with you." Inside, Serafina sat at the table, eyes wide, hands clasped. I knew she finally understood, finally felt the weight of what she had done. And for the first time in weeks, I saw her trembling not out of fear, but out of recognition. By mid-December, the tension in Serafina's house was palpable. Caleb had started calling me nonstop, each call more desperate than the last. I didn't pick up. Instead, I watched from my living room, the streetlights casting long shadows over the snow. I sipped my bourbon slowly, letting them stew in uncertainty. Serafina showed up again that night, this time with her hands stuffed deep in her pockets, teeth chattering. "Dad, please, it's too much," she whispered, almost pleading. She wasn't just worried about the mortgage anymore. She was afraid of what she had allowed to happen between us. I shook my head, feeling the years of heartbreak and labor weigh on me. "Too much." I said, "You're finally seeing the consequences of pushing me aside." My voice was calm, but inside, a storm roared. Her lips quivered. "I never meant to hurt you, Dad. I thought you'd understand." I leaned forward, letting the silence stretch. I wanted her to feel it, the weight of my disappointment, my pride, and my unspoken love. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the snow piling up outside. I thought about how many Christmases I'd worked extra shifts to buy presents she never knew I'd sacrificed for. I thought about her laughter, the smell of her cookies burning in the oven, the way she used to tug me into snowball fights. But those memories were now sharp knives, reminding me of everything lost. I poured another bourbon, swirling it in my glass. Each sip burned, but it cleared my mind. I had to plan carefully. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about teaching a lesson she couldn't forget. Caleb, I realized, wasn't just an obstacle. He was a symbol of a world that valued wealth and appearances over loyalty and heart, and he was about to learn exactly what that meant. I began drafting letters, phone calls, subtle nudges, each move calculated to make them feel the full weight of reality. Every action was a reminder I had built their life, and now I controlled the foundation. Serafina confronted me again, this time in my garage. The smell of oil and sawdust filled the air, familiar and grounding. "Dad, why are you doing this?" she demanded. "Why are you punishing us?" I wiped my hands on a rag, the muscles in my arms flexing from years of hard work. "Punishing?" I said, "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm making you see what happens when you forget where you came from." Her eyes filled with tears, but her voice trembled with anger. "You're being cruel." "Cruel?" I repeated, voice low, almost a growl. "I've been invisible for years. I carried you. I paid for everything, and you turned your back. I'm not cruel. I'm real." She took a step back, staring at me as if she'd never truly seen me before. And maybe she hadn't. The morning of December 20th, I received a call from the bank. A serious notice had been sent. Caleb was frantic. Serafina was panicked. And I felt something unexpected. A pang of guilt? Maybe, but also a surge of satisfaction at this time. The scales were tipping in my favor. I drove past their house that evening, watching through frost-covered windows. Caleb was pacing, phone glued to his ear. Serafina sat silently, frozen, finally aware of the consequences. My heart twisted, but I knew this was necessary. I remembered all the nights I stayed up, building, working, sacrificing. Each brick, each bill, every sleepless hour had led to this. And for the first time, I realized they might finally understand what it meant to have me in their life. A single moment can change everything. And this was that moment. On the night before Christmas Eve, I decided it was time for the final move. I parked my truck down the street from their house, snow crunching under the tires. Caleb was outside, pacing, yelling into his phone. Serafina stood near the front door, clutching her scarf, her eyes wide. I stepped onto the sidewalk, letting the cold bite my face. This wasn't about cruelty anymore. It was about teaching them the cost of taking someone for granted. I had given years, sweat, and love without question. Tonight, they would finally feel the weight of that absence. Caleb looked up when he heard footsteps. Recognition and fear flashed across his face. "What the hell are you doing here?" he shouted. I didn't answer. I just nodded toward the house, letting him stew in his panic. Serafina flinched, stepping back, and I realized she was beginning to understand the depth of what she had done. This was it, the moment where my presence, my power, and my love collided. Inside, the house was tense, the Christmas lights casting cold reflections on the walls. Serafina avoided my gaze. Caleb's hands were shaking. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, and let the silence stretch. "I never wanted this," Serafina whispered, voice cracking. I thought I was protecting everyone." I took a step inside. "Protecting?" I asked, my voice low and rough. "Do you know what it feels like to be invisible to the person you built? To have every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every penny spent treated like it didn't matter?" Caleb opened his mouth, but I silenced him with a look. "No, you don't get to speak yet. You need to understand first." I pulled out the mortgage statement, laying it on the table. The words felt heavier than any hammer I'd swung in my life. Delinquent, frozen, under my control. Serafina's face paled. "Dad, you can't." I cut her off. "I can. I did. And now you see. Not because I hate you, not because I want revenge, but because I had to remind you of the truth. You didn't see me when it mattered, so now you feel the absence. Do you understand?" Tears streamed down her face. Caleb's jaw clenched, fists tightening. For a moment, there was only silence and the hum of the heater. Then, Serafina stepped forward. I see you, Dad. I see everything now. I was wrong." I nodded slowly. Relief and pride battled inside me. She had finally realized that love wasn't about appearances or convenience. It was about presence, sacrifice, and loyalty. Christmas morning, the snow fell softly outside, blanketing the streets in white. Serafina and I stood in the kitchen, the scent of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls filling the air. Caleb hovered awkwardly, a quiet observer. I handed Serafina a cup of coffee, black like mine. She smiled, the little girl I once knew shining through. "I'm sorry, Dad," she said, voice small but sincere. I ruffled her hair, feeling the years melt away. "You're my daughter. Mistakes happen. Just remember the hands that built your world." That day, they learned something Caleb could never buy. Loyalty, love, and sacrifice can't be replaced by money or status. The mortgage remained frozen until we agreed on a plan together. But the lesson had already been delivered. I watched them eat breakfast, laughter returning in small bursts. The warmth wasn't from the oven or the lights. It was from understanding, from connection restored. And for the first time that December, I felt whole again,